Taylor Swift's latest album, Life of a Showgirl, is certainly, as expected, breaking streaming records, but also breaking from some expectations. The commercial success is certainly undeniable, but a bit of fan resentment, or sentiment, I should say, reveals a growing disconnect between strategy and maybe substance. Here to talk all things Taylor Swift and her marketing prowess, as always, Sinead O'Sullivan, author of Good Ideas and Power Moves. Welcome back. Great to have you. So this album here is the most streamed debut ever. But what have you made so far of the early fan reaction?
It's so interesting because on the one hand, the statistics tell us that this is a breakout album. On the other hand, you don't have to look very far on Reddit to see that fans are substantially confused about this new album. And let me tell you why. Taylor Swift fans do not obsess over her purely for her music, okay? She has created this entire universe that these Swifties have been living in, some of them for years, some even for decades. This album is a staunch departure from this kind of complex world that she tends to build with her music, and has moved more to this kind of one-dimensional, very flat world. And the protagonist really at the middle of this is Travis Kelce, her new fiance. So fans are just a little bit confused why they used to get this kind of poetic license with her, and it nearly seems to have been replaced by kind of cheaper penis jokes.
Okay. Oh, well, there we go. So is it simply that might sound like a weird question. Is it simply that Taylor Swift is now herself, the individual, the artist in a different place in her life, now being engaged? That sort of results in a different kind of tone and temperature to the music, or is there much more to it than that?
I think there's probably more to it than that. I mean, the relationship that Swifties have with Taylor Swift is extremely parasocial. You never really know who she is 10, 20 years ago, today, yesterday, tomorrow. However, I think this is really more of a strategic question because really what Taylor Swift has been selling for the last several albums is this kind of very rich, poetic kind of, her listeners really believe her to be the Patti Smith, this kind of literary genius of their generation, of our generation. What they are seeing in this album instead seems to be very flat. Now, interestingly, her last album, The Tortured Poets Department, was a real flop with critics because critics didn't understand that they were, Swifties were there for this kind of universe. Um, they thought that the critics thought that the last album was too slow, too boring. This is a nearly a 180 reversal of that. Critics love this album. However, despite it being poppy and upbeat and happy and everything rhymes the way it should do, it is this time the Swiftie fans that feel it fallen flat. So I think Taylor Swift finds herself in this impossible tightrope. Do you try to go for the Emmys and the Grammys and really cater to the critics, or do you kind of stick with your core fan base? And of course, this presents a new problem when you've already, kind of scaled as much as you can with your core fan base. What kind of music do you create? What kind of art do you create to kind of widen the net of potential future fans? So she's at a very impossible juncture of her career, and I think this album has been quite interesting to show how she might be thinking about her next music. Does she go more mainstream, or does she kind of stick within this very tight, lore-ish universe that she's been
Hmm.
building the last several albums?
She has undoubtedly mastered uh, economic strategy in the music industry, general marketing. How do you think that rollout was for this particular album? And if anything, what maybe missed the mark a little bit, Sinead?
Well, I mean, I just saw before we started chatting that the as of right now, the number of variants of her album that have been released to date is 42. So I think, her power base as such is not a very hierarchical system. It's a very, very flat organization. She is one of her fans, and that has always been the mass appeal of Taylor Swift. I've always said she's the only billionaire in the world that people can really relate to. This launch feels different. It feels productized, commoditized, and certainly, the kind of typical Taylor Swift products, that range is increased drastically. So I think not only is the substance of the products Swifties are finding quite thin. But they're finding that it's been much more heavily commercialized, and this was also a little bit jarring for some of her longer term fans.
What is the brand identity shift, if we can safely identify it as that, from kind of outsider poets to more mainstream icon? What does that general shift mean for her audience, who undoubtedly, of course, are aging right alongside with the artist herself?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because a lot of her core fan base has grown up with her. And again, we're seeing a massive departure here. We used to kind of get this feeling, I say we Swifties, although I am one, this feeling of being in the trenches with Taylor and that she was, kind of one of the Swifties. Now it's more about, some of her lyrics, in this album, and even the last one reference, "I wanted to be left the F alone, and, people do leave me alone, and you don't really know what my life is like." So I don't know if there's a growing resentment between Taylor Swift and how she views, that her fans obviously are gonna have a perspective on everything she does because she is their idol. And I think certainly through her music, some of that is coming out. Now, in terms of brand identity, we can see in her personal life a massive shift. Again, she went from kind of this tortured poet as such. Is she Patti Smith of our generation? We don't know. But she's certainly gone much more mainstream in who she's dating. She is a American football soon to be wife, current fiance. Her social circles reflect that. And I think that is a cultural departure from where she's been in her personal life before that.
I'm sure there's more than a few people who noticed, say, hey, Taylor Swift's fiance scored a touchdown last night on Monday Night Football, and probably view Taylor Swift through the lens of who his fiance is and not his own football career. I wonder about the impact on things like sales, her commercial power continuing to grow, and then, obviously the Eras tour was just an incredible sensation, even economically speaking. And I wonder,
Absolutely.
is, a lot of artists work on a new album and then there's an accompanying tour that goes along with that album. Can we expect another tour? I feel like the timeline's a little different for someone like Taylor Swift.
She has said that she will not be doing a tour in the near future because her tour was so big that the next time she wants a tour, she wants to do something like that again, and that takes time and planning. I mean, it is interesting culturally. I think, when we think about Taylor Swift as a business scaling, she has gone from having, let's say 300 million staunch fans in the US. She is now essentially doubled that as she's brought in their male counterparts who are, maybe staunch NFL fans. She released, I mean, let's not forget, she started this campaign on an NFL podcast. And the day after she announced the album launch, um, Travis Kelsey, her NFL fiance, was doing the mainstream kind of, GQ and other kind of, outlets, media interviews. So she's very much targeting an increased and much wider fan base. But again, the question remains, can she scale what she had, and can she create that increased fan base at the depth that she had? And this album reaction suggests maybe not.
Sinead, before I let you go, are you as surprised as I was that Taylor Swift is in fact not doing the Super Bowl halftime show?
She's always been a bit weird about, she's never really followed expectation in terms of where she's performed. I will say, she gave personal reasons for not doing it, in that her fiance may be playing and she wouldn't want to be distracted by that. We also know she's a very, very good business person. And so if she wasn't going to the Super Bowl, I imagine maybe that there may be commercial reasons for that as well.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be fascinating to see if Bad Bunny brings anyone out, because the surprise guests during that, 14 minutes is usually one of the most watched things. Does Bad Bunny have any songs with Taylor Swift? Not that I know of, but you would know better.
No, I don't think so.
I don't think so. Well, maybe one gets released. You never know what happens. It's a fascinating story at a really important time. It's incredibly important across cross currents of social commentary, of economics, and so many other things. Very grateful for your time and context to help us better understand it. Sinead O'Sullivan, author of Good Ideas and Power Moves. Sinead, thank you as always.
Thank you.